Hello and welcome to a Young Wong's tutorial of how to make a side-scroller game with Python and Pygame. Here we're going to go through the basic steps involved in making a side-scroller game. To begin with, we're going to look into the requirements for us to get started. So we're going to need a laptop with Python 3 and Pygame installed, and you can look at videos on the Young Wong's YouTube channel to help you on how to do that. You're also going to need the assets that are used. You can use the assets that are used in this tutorial by going to the Google Drive link provided. And you can also download some nice ones at GameArt2D. A Pygame cheat sheet will come in handy when you need to use different operations that are provided by Pygame. I'm going to be doing this in VS Code, but you can easily do this in any other Python editor that you have as well. Now, the first step for us is to create a blank Pygame window of size 640 by 480. So let's just get down to it. And I'm going to make a new file called game.py. You will notice that I already have all the assets in a folder called assets within my game folder. Make a blank Pygame window. I'm going to import Pygame. I'm going to make a screen. You can also set the title of the window. Side scroll. Now we're also going to need a game loop in which we will first update the screen, and then we will also create an event loop which will fetch us the events from the screen, and we're interested in the event quit. And if the quit event occurs, we will close the window and we will also exit Python. All right, so let's try this out and see if it behaves the way we expect it to behave. I think there is a small spelling, and we fix that, and voila, here we have a blank Pygame window. And that is step 1. Now, step 2 begins with creating a menu function. And we can take a look at that. So we need to make a menu function. So whatever code we have right now, we put it into a menu function. We also use the image provided and place it at 0, 0. We also make sure to scale it to fit the entire window. And we look for the mouse button click in the range specified for us to be able to go to the game function from the menu. So let's try this out. So I'm going to take this entire code over here, indent it, and I'm going to say def menu. I'm also going to call this function at the bottom. The next thing that I need to do is load up the image, and I'm going to say image is equal to image.load, and assets menu.png is what I'm going to use. I'm also going to scale it, so I'm going to say image is equal to pygame.transform.scale, and this takes 2 arguments. The first is the image, and the second is a tuple of the size you want to scale it to. And finally, I'm going to split this image onto the screen at 0, 0 so that it covers the entire window. All right, let's check it out and see what it gives us. There you go. So you have the menu screen and you have the play button. The next thing we need to do is make this play button clickable and such that it takes us to another function called game. So let's go ahead and add in the if event type is equal to Pygame.mouse button down, and if the mouse X is in the range, and let me quickly take a look at the range, that is 300 and 325 and then 200 and 228. So that's 300, 325, and the Y is in the range 200 to 228. This will detect click. So let's go ahead and run this, and we should be able to see the play button being detected. Now that completes step 2. All right. Now the step 3, we need to make a game function with the background image and a key event for space. Okay, this is very similar to what we've already done. So what we'll do is we go ahead and make a def game. You will copy over most of this stuff that's over here, but we're going to change up the image that we use, and we're going to use level 1. Level 1, we scale it in the same way, we split it in the same way, and the difference this time is we're going to look for a key down event. And we remove all of this, and we will just print the string jump. And let's also add in the call to the game in the menu. So let's go ahead and run this. You see we are at the menu, we click on this, and now we are at level 1. And if you press the space key, you see the text jump. Right? So that completes the next step. Now we get into the logic in step 4 of the actual screen scrolling. And how do we do this? We add 2 additional background images which are outside the window but adjacent to the current background. We make the X of the screen into a variable, and we constantly decrease it by 1. And as it decreases, it keeps going negative. And the moment it gets to minus 640, we place it back at the 0. So let's try this out. So we're going to make 2 more copies of this. We put 1 above, 1 below. We're going to make a variable called bgx and set it to 0. The x of this becomes bgx. The x of this becomes bgx minus 640 because it needs to be next to it. And this becomes bgx plus 640. And in the loop, we're going to constantly decrease bgx by 1 until it becomes lesser than or equal to minus 640, and then we return bgx to 0. And then we can check this out and see our side screen scrolling. There you go. You can see a seamless side screen scrolling which never really ends. All right, that completes this step, and then we move on to the next. So step 5 is where the player comes in, and we're going to just make the player stationary at one position, and the position is kind of given to us for ease. So we have 50, 325 is where we begin, and it's the illusion of the movement of the player. The player actually doesn't move, it's the screen that's moving. So let's go ahead and load up player. Boy.png, and we're going to put the boy onto the screen at 50, comma, so it's in player 50, 325, and let's take a look to see what we get. Okay, that's a spelling issue. There we go. And it doesn't seem to have found it. Boy.png. Oh, this is Windows. You're going to be using the other slash, and what you'll notice is the boy is huge, so we need to shrink him down to the right size. Now, what I have found to be the ideal size for the boy is when we shrink him down to about 20% of what he is right now. And then for this, we're going to use a slightly different transform, which is called roto zoom, that allows us to scale images down proportionately. Transform.scale, and we will do player, and we don't want to rotate him, so we say 0 and we say 0.2, and let's take a look. Syntax error. I want to say roto zoom over here. And there you go. You see the ball scrolling along the screen at the right place. That completes step 5. Let's take a look at what's next. Now, step 6 is where we make the player jump. And for this, we make the y of the player into a variable. We add a variable jump, which is used like a flag when the space key is pressed, which is used as a flag when the space key is pressed. Then we also need a jump count, because the jump continues for a while and then stops. So we add a jump count, and 40 is the recommended number there. And the amount by which the y needs to decrease is 4. Then we need to add gravity for the player once the jump has peaked, and we need a bottom below which the gravity will not apply. So let's try to see what this would look like. So let's go ahead and make a variable called player y, and we started off at 325, and we use that. The next thing we do is we say jump is equal to 1 when the space key is pressed, and here we say if jump is equal to 1, then player y is equal to player y minus 4, and we then need to add gravity. So we will set gravity to 1 for now, and what we can do next, we also need to add a variable called jump count so that we know when to stop moving upwards. We'll set it to 0, and whenever the player is below 325, right? So when the player.y is less than 325, he is going to be acted upon by gravity. Alright, the last thing we need for the jump is we're going to continuously count jump count, and when jump count becomes greater than 40, we're going to set it back to 0, and we will also turn off jump. Right, so let's take a look as to how this looks. I need to make jump as well. Jump is equal to 0, and let's run it, and here you go. And you can see the player being able to jump. All right, now for the final stage of our code. Is to make obstacles that we can jump over. So we have a crate image that's already provided. Its y needs to be set to 360, and we'll also be scaling it down by around 0.8, and its x constantly decreases. It needs to be faster than the screen, or else it looks like it's moving with the screen. And we can randomize each crate speed so that they look a little different. Alright, so let's test this out. So first things first, you got to load up the crate image. So we will say crate is equal to Pygame, just like we did with the player. Image.load assets, and we have crate. Then similarly, we need to scale this down too. So we'll scale it down to 80% of its original size. Pygame.transform.rotozoom, because we want to scale proportionately. And we say crate, 0, because there's no rotation, and then we say 0.8 to make it 80% of its size. Next thing that we do is we split the crate on the screen, and we're going to need a variable for the crate. So I'm going to say crate x and 360 as the y. That remains fixed, and then we're going to go ahead and create a crate x is equal to 700, which is slightly outside the window, so it seems like it's coming from outside. We're also going to need to make the crate move to the left constantly, so we will create a crate speed variable, and we'll set that to about 2. And what we can do over here is say crate x minus equals crate speed. Now we also need to regenerate these crates. So if now the crate x becomes lesser than, let's say, about minus 50, then we would regenerate the crate x at a random position. We're going to need to import random for this between 700 and 800. And we will also randomize the crate speed so that we have different speeds. We can make this around 2 to 5. So let's go ahead and import random. right, let's check this out. Okay, that's a typo. I'm fixing some bugs over here, and there we go. So you see different traits being regenerated at different speeds, and our character is able to jump over them, and this is essentially the game itself. You can continue to build this further and add collectible objects. The last step for us is to be able to detect a collision and such that we move back to the menu. So let's take a look at how that can be done. And I'm also going to uncomment the menu for this so that we go through the menu. The last thing that we need to do is add the collisions. Now, the collisions are very simple. What you got to do is the part where we do the blit actually returns a rectangular object. So we need to store that into a variable, and we will call this as prect for the player, and we'll call it as crect for the crate. And at the bottom, we'll say if prect.collide rect.c_rect, then we just return to our previous menu. That's pretty much it. So let's take a look at how this works. And you see the menus come up. I'm going to hit play to start, and I'm going to jump over this object. But if I hit one like this one, I go back to the menu. And that is pretty much it. There's so many ways in which this can be extended. You can add scores, you can have multiple players, you can have different levels, you can have different speeds. So it's all about how creative you can be with this. So we look forward to seeing what you can come up with, and have a great time. Thank you.